Hey there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome. Today we're going to talk a little bit about or a couple of the domains and kingdoms that we know that life is broken down into. We've been talking about classification. We've been talking about how we organize it based on their organisms are classified by their physical and genetic traits. Right? We put similar ones next to each other, and we kind of break it down. And we have this thing where we go from domain, kingdom, phylum, class, where it gets more and more specific kind of as we keep branching out as we go along. So now what we're going to do, I'm going to go through this chart real quick. And this chart actually won't take us very long because most of the terminology we've done in here we're already familiar with. It's just about putting it in a nice cohesive chart about how we break down certain things in life. All right, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to step aside in a moment. You should already have out your handy dandy notebooks. I want you to copy down this chart, and we're only going to write like one or two words in each one of these boxes here. All right, and then we'll go through it pretty quickly. All right, so I'm going to step aside, pause the video, make the chart, and once that happens, I'll step back over. All right, go. You done? Okay. All right, so now let's start talking about the different things here. All right, we're going to start with the way we're going to do this is we're going to start talking about the different domains of life, which we remember is the most broad category when we talk about organizing life. And then we're going to talk about within those domains some of the kingdoms. And then we're not going to go into classes, or we're not going to go into phylums and things like that. That gets a little bit too many of them. All right, but what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the major characteristics. Remember, organized by physical and genetic characteristics. We're going to talk about some of the characteristics of the organisms that separate the different kingdoms. All right. Now, today we're going to talk about 6 kingdoms. This keeps changing. When I was in high school, it was 8. 10, 20 years before that, it was only 5. All right. You guys talked a little bit about history. At one point, there was only 2. All right. And so we keep changing that based on every time we find some new organisms, we have to readjust a little bit about what we're going to do. We're going to talk about types of cells, the number of cells, the food source, and of course, and just a little extra information. We'll talk a little bit about each one. All right, so make sure you can see that there. There we go. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. The first domain that we're going to talk about, the first major category, we find a living organism, and we have to break it down into one of these major categories first. This first domain is called Prokarya. All right, it is Prokarya. All right, so I'm going to start by talking about the domains and then the kingdom, and then we'll go back and talk about each kingdom. All right, we have Prokarya, and actually only has one kingdom within this major category, and that is bacteria. All bacteria fall under this category. All right, now you say, well, it's only one of the categories. It's actually the most abundant form of life on this planet. All right, is bacteria. And there are lots of different types of bacteria, phylums, classes, orders, families, genus, species, but they all fall under this category. All right. Then we have the second one, which is actually very similar to it. It is called Archaea bacteria. That is the domain. All right. Now this one is very unique. This one's actually one of the newer ones. All right. They had kind of some different names for this one going forward, and it only has one kingdom as well. It is also called Archaea bacteria. All right. These ones are very unique because they're only really found in the most extreme circumstances on the planet. We'll talk a little bit about them, but they are another type of bacteria. All right. And the last one that we're going to talk about, notice it's a big one here because there's several kingdoms that it's going to fall under. All right. You might be able to guess what it is, knowing that this one's called Prokaryote, which kind of looks like the word prokaryote. We know that bacteria are prokaryotes. All right. This one is called Eukarya. Sorry, I had some technical difficulties. Let me get back to this. This domain right here is called Eukarya. All right. And so let's break down each one of these ones here. There are 4 kingdoms that we really break this down into. We have, let's do these ones first. We'll talk about Animalia, Plantae, which is the plant kingdom, based off their Latin names. All right. Fungi, my nickname in high school. All right. And then this last one is actually a relatively newer one. One of my favorite words to say. Protists. Protists. All right, that's a tricky one. We'll talk about that one last. All right, so now let's break down each one of these ones here. All right. So in this domain kingdom, under Prokarya, the type of cell, you might be able to guess, or at least I hope you can, guess the type of cell that falls under Prokarya, and it is a prokaryotic cell. It is a prokaryotic cell. All right, we know that prokaryotic cells always have to be unicellular. All right. These have to be, they can either be, most of them are heterotrophic, which means they have to get their food from a different food source, eat their food. Although we now know that there are some types of bacteria that can be photosynthetic. There were a very small group of them that actually have chloroplasts in them. Right? They're called cyanophotosynthetic bacteria. Right? So they can also be autotrophic because some of them have that chloroplast to create that sugar. All right. And finally, there are 3 different shapes for bacteria. There is 3 major kinds. There's the coccus, which is kind of the like a circle shape or sphere shape. There's Bacillus, which is kind of boxy shaped, and then Spirillum. Which is spiral shaped. All right, so if you get a bacterial infection, it's going to be either Staphylococcus, that's strep throat. It's bacteria kind of in that shape there. All right, that's kind of one of the more common ones there. All right, so that's our prokaryote. Any category that is prokaryotic, unicellular, it can be heterotrophic or autotrophic and has this kind of shape, is probably going to fall under the domain of Prokarya and or specifically the kingdom of bacteria. All right. Then we go to Archaea bacteria. Now this one's not that much different. All right. Like I said, this is kind of one of the newer ones. They are also made out of, as you might guess from the word bacteria, also made out of prokaryotic cells. They are also unicellular. All right. They also can be mostly heterotrophic, but some very, very few can be autotrophic. All right. The real distinction, these look exactly the same. Why did we make these very different? These ones are a whole new category of ones that we've been able to find as we've been able to go new places on this planet. We found this type of bacteria in only the most extreme environments, like floating through space on an asteroid, or in the pits of a volcano, or alive in a glacier, right? In the deepest parts of the ocean, all right? Only found in extreme environments. in places where we thought that life could not exist. It was too hot, too cold, not enough oxygen, whatever it is. All right, we find these ones, and it was so unique that we had to basically kind of create a whole new category for these. Sometimes they're called thermophiles because they are found in such extreme temperatures. All right, now let's get into the juicy ones here. Talking about Eukarya. All right, start with the very first one, the one that you fit into. These are Eukarya, or domain Eukarya, which means they are mostly identified by their type of cell. All right. This is going to be a eukaryotic cell. All right. Animal cells, or anything in the kingdom Animalia, are going to be multicellular. All right. All right. They are going to be multicellular. They are also going to be heterotrophs. Right. This one's, I mean, for the fun facts on this one, you're in this kingdom. There's a lot of things. Fish fit into this one. Birds fit into this one. Any kind of animal, all right, even insects fit into this one. Although they break off very quickly right after the kingdom. All right, basically any kind of organism that is not a fungus, a plant, or we'll talk about protists, is going to fit on this kingdom. So extremely broad, but different than bacteria. So we've already had our first separation here. All right. Now we talk about Plantae. Again, made up of, instead of, or when eukaryotic cells, these are made up of animal cells. All right. Plantae are eukaryotic cells, but they are plant cells. They have the cell wall. They have chloroplasts. All right. They have a large vacuole. They are multicellular. All right. One of the big distinctions between us as humans or fish or monkeys or whatever and plants is how they get their food. All right. Obviously, there's a lot of physical looking differences, but when we're talking about this really broad category of kingdoms right now, one of the major differences is they are autotrophic. Now, some people say, well, what about like the Venus flytrap? That eats food, right? It will catch, like the Venus flytrap will catch a fly or something. It is also autotrophic. That is a cool mechanism they had in Venus flytraps grow in areas where the soil is not very nitrogen rich, and so they need to supplement it. All right, it's like having a supplement for them. They are still autotrophic cells, though. Their cells themselves are autotrophic. All right, very good. And then we have our different plants here. All right, we know things about them. They're going to have obviously chloroplasts, and they do photosynthesis. To do that, you need chloroplasts to do that photosynthesis to make that sunlight turn it into sugar, or turn sugar or glucose. Okay, fungi. In my nickname in high school, fungi. These are eukaryotic cells. All right, they are typically plant cells, but all right, they are eukaryotic cells. They can be either multicellular or unicellular. When they are multicellular, they are still not very large organisms. They're typically pretty small organisms, but they can be multicellular or unicellular. Right. One thing that kind of differentiates this whole category is about how they get their food. They are heterotrophs, just like we are. All right, but they're a very specific type of heterotrophs. They are decomposers. All right, they are a very specific type, and they are able to get their food by basically getting the chemical reaction from decaying material. So you find a lot of fungi on, especially in the woods, on trees that are dying because the wood, the plant cells that are in the tree are starting to break down and fall apart. And when they break down, those cells are releasing those nutrients and those fungi are taking them up. They're eating them, but they do it kind of in a different way. They get their material from dying or decaying matter. All right. So they get it from dying or dead matter to get their energy. All right, that's really one of the major things that distinguishes them. And and one of the cool things about them is they reproduce using spores, since they are kind of almost plant-like. Right, they're heterotrophs like animals, but they don't move around, right? So they're not autotrophic though, but they do kind of act like a plant. The fact that they're kind of stationary. They reproduce using spores. They shoot them out into the air. They fly around, land somewhere, hopefully on dying material, and they can start eating. All right. They reproduce using spores. All right. And our last one here that we're going to do, I did this one last because it's good to talk about these two first, and it's a little bit one of the newer ones. This is a Protista, or what we call Protists. This is a hard one to dissect because this one's changed a lot. This one became very popular when it first kind of came out. Then people kind of backed off and almost got rid of that kingdom, and now it's kind of resurging as we're finding new forms of life in different areas. All right. They look very similar to a lot of other different species or these other kingdoms, and that's what can make this kind of tough. All right. So they are made up of eukaryotic cells. All right. They are. Sorry, I dropped my pen there. They are eukaryotic cells. They are unicellular or multicellular, although they are mostly unicellular. All right. Mostly unicellular. Right. They are, they can be heterotrophs or autotrophs, and that's going to be really important because we're going to talk about why that is in a moment. All right. They're either heterotrophic or autotrophic. All right. And what we're going to talk about the fun thing. So these are typically multicellular cells. What really distinguishes them, though, it's almost kind of like a blend of a couple of these, right? They're multicellular, right? They can be unicellular like a fungi. They're autotrophic or heterotrophic, just like, animal cells are autotrophic and plant cells are heterotrophic. These are very kind of almost like a hybrid kingdom where we found organisms that didn't quite fit in animal, it didn't quite fit in plant, it didn't quite fit in fungi, and so we created a new one that's kind of like this land of misfit organisms here called Protists. They're really cool, and you find a lot of them. Just because they're kind of misfits doesn't mean that they are, in terms of the classification, doesn't mean they're not abundant. They're very popular, especially in like lake water or ponds and stuff like that. You find a lot of Protists. The one big thing is, like I said, that they're eukaryotic, but in how they eat their food, all right? Some of their cells are heterotrophic and the ones that are autotrophic. So the ones that are heterotrophic are what we call animal-like cells, because they're mostly made up of animal cells. Those are the ones that don't have chloroplasts. They typically have small vacuoles, just a membrane, a cell membrane, no cell wall. All right, we call that they're animal-like. Running out of space there. All right, and then the ones that are autotrophic, we call those ones plant-like protists. All right. Whew, that's a big old chart there, and I know this is a long video here. So what do I expect you to know in the end? All right? If I gave you an organism and I gave you some of the ideas about some of its functions based on its number of cells or food source or maybe a description of it, type of cell it is, could you identify which domain and kingdom it is? All right? I'll give you guys a little practice on that as we go forward. All right? But notice as we go, we have the three different domains. We split it up by whether they are prokaryotic or eukaryotic, right? Prokaryotes, eukaryotes, right? And then even in eukaryotes, we have different things that identify the different domains, all right? Now you think like this is a lot here, right? But all we're talking about is literally really basic stuff of like how many cells does it have and where does it eat? All living organisms need to take in nutrients. So these are still really broad categories we're talking here. And on top of that, then we would go into phylums next. Each one of these have several different phylums. And that's getting even more specific, but we're not going to do that. All right? So I do expect you to be able to, we'll have some practice, but I do expect you to be able to identify if I gave you a random sample organism, could you identify, is it a kingdom, bacteria? Is it a plant? Is it a protist? Just based on some basic criteria. All right, I'm going to end this video now because it's already getting kind of long. Otherwise, make sure you have it all up there. You can always go back and look at it. Thanks for watching. Good luck, and may the science be with you. Bye.